Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Dr. Wendie Trubow. Dr. Wendie Trubow, MD, MBA, is a functional medicine gynecologist with a thriving practice at 5 Journeys and is passionate about helping women optimize their health and lives. Through her struggles with mold and metal toxicity, celiac disease, and other health issues, Trubow has developed a deep sense of compassion and expertise for what her patients are facing. She is the co-author of Dirty Girl, Ditch the Toxins, Look Great, and Feel Freaking Amazing. Today, we talked about the invisible part of us, the inside, but we may only recognize when things are going wrong by the symptoms we have. So we covered toxins, you guessed it, and what examples of toxins are that people consume without knowing every single day. Wendie talks to us about her own detoxification journey, what it means to age gracefully and how we can achieve that, how to tune in and interpret the messages that our body has been trying to give us through our symptoms. And she gives us advice on how to go about eliminating toxins, whether we should go cold turkey, wean off of things. There are different methods for different effects we might be facing, or if we're getting off coffee versus alcohol or sugar, it's going to be a little bit different. And also, today, Wendie talked about leaky gut, what it is, how we can go about getting rid of it, how long it takes to get rid of it, which I thought she really covered this topic in a very thorough manner. It's different than any of the other experts I've had on surrounding leaky gut. So I think you're really going to want to tune into that. And we also talked about mold, heavy metals, and they lurk in places you would never expect. We talked a lot about why we should all be going organic and more. This was such a great podcast about just tuning in to your body and listening to its signals and signs. So without further ado, we're going to dive into this episode with the one, the only, Dr. Wendie Trubow. I am very excited to welcome Dr. Wendie Trubow to the show today.
Thanks, Linda. Great to be here.
Yeah, I am really interested to talk about the title of your book. It's intriguing.
Yeah.
Dirty Girl. It isn't the connotation we might think. Can you tell us how you came up with that title?
Totally. So I've been in the world of getting rid of toxins in myself for a number of years. And when I first did all these tests and got the results and realized that I was basically a loyal holding cell for tons of toxins, I looked at my husband and I said, I am such a dirty girl. And then I went, oh, and that's the book we're going to write.
It's so good. And I just find it so interesting that I was reading in your book, you were eating healthy, you're, working out, exercising, you're doing all the things, but yet you had all these issues. So I guess just eating our greens and exercising isn't enough. So
right.
Tell us a little bit about your journey through discovering this.
Yeah. So the first plug I'll say is, it's really important to eat your greens and exercise, right? Like you can't be healthy without that stuff, but sometimes it's not going to get you where you want to go. If you're someone like me with terrible genes, lots of exposures and high stress, because stress impairs your body's ability to start getting rid of it. So, you sort of look back and go, okay, I have really bad epigenetics, which are the things alongside your genes that make your genes turn on or not. I have celiac disease. I have 2 copies of MTHFR, 2 copies for celiac, 2 copies for vitamin D deficiency, a bunch of other methylation issues. I was kind of not a really good detox picture to start with. And then layer on, well, I grew up in the 70s. We had sloppy joes for dinner and then microwaves in the 80s. And then I went into medicine, which is super stressful. And then I went into OBGYN, which is even more stressful. And right, like just pile it on. And then by that point, and in that time, I had gotten exposures to lead because I grew up in a home built before 1978. So it had lead paint. I had mercury fillings, a whole bunch of them. I had multiple antibiotic courses. I had leaky gut. So all of the toxins I was exposed to that from food were getting right into my bloodstream. We didn't really know about organic when I was a kid. It just wasn't a thing. So start to pile on these things. And then later on, you know, I had all these kids. I had 4 kids and it all adds up. And then you start to layer on, well, we didn't really know about the harmful nature of plastics and different toxins. And because I have such bad detox, when I'm exposed to them, I hold on to them. Someone else might get rid of them. 40% of people have MTHFR mutations, and I'm one of those 40%. And so it's not as easy to methylate, bind, and get rid of toxins. And then when I have gut dysfunction, it's even worse. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
So let's talk about toxins for a second.
Yeah.
What is an example of toxins that people consume unknowingly every single day?
Food. I mean, so anything on your food, if it's not organic, has a toxin in it. So if it's not organic, it's got herbicide, pesticide, insecticide. That's right there. Those are endocrine disrupting. That means it throws off your periods, throws off your adrenals, your thyroid, inhibits fertility. Some of them are pro-cancer causing agents. So that's pretty basic, right? We all eat. But then there's stuff like, you know, you and I are both fully made up, but all the things that got us to looking the way we look, a lot of them have a lot of toxins in it.
Like lipstick,
beauty products, nail polish, hair.
Yeah.
Anything you're putting on your body, if it's not organic and not highly rated and not good for you, you're absorbing those toxins. So.
Okay. And so if we're unable to methylate it out and detox and all of that, then it's just a compounding problem that just keeps. Okay. I want to back up to what you said about the paint with lead being in an older house. So what would be the symptoms then of having this lead in your body that you're not getting rid of?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ones is osteoporosis or osteopenia, so bone loss, especially at an age where you shouldn't have bone loss, right? If you're anywhere under 60 and you've got serious bone loss, that should be concerning for lead. And then hair loss, and then probably for women that's most pertinent is difficulty losing weight, right? You know, so when you're 20 and you eat right and you exercise, the pounds fall off. But when you get older, it's harder. And that's largely because of this accumulation of toxins. And nobody really thinks about where they go, but they go into our bones, which is why the osteoporosis, and then lead and other toxins, not just lead, go into our fat. So the people who say, oh my God, I work out all the time and I eat well and I sleep and I'm not a stress ball and I can't budge my weight. I'm like, you've got toxins, girl. You know, that's how you know.
I know. So that leads me on. So we've got this lead, but then I had the same issue as you. You were talking about your mercury fillings. I can't remember if you said it or I read it in your book, but I know you had issues with the mercury and your fillings. I had the same. I had heavy mercury poisoning. Yeah. It was high, very high, like very high when they tested me. And I had fillings that they used to put them under the gum. And they were leaching into my bloodstream. And when I went to a biological dentist to have them basically taken out the correct way so it didn't make my problem worse and get even more into my system when they go busting into them. And it was like night and day for me as far as my my energy level. I mean, my goodness, I went from putting my head down on the desk in the morning when I first got up, not knowing why I was so exhausted, to, uh, going to school, training fitness competitors, putting up a gym, authoring 2 books, winning championships. I mean, I'm just saying I went from this
Yeah.
person that doesn't know why I'm exhausted when I got all this out. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about heavy metals in general,
Sure.
and how can we detox from that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's so many layers to this, Linda. So one level is what are the metals you're looking for? Where are they found? So lead is lead pipes. There's still 10 million homes in the United States that have lead pipes. This is 2022. So there's still a lot of people being exposed to lead. And then if you grew up in a house or live in a house or do construction on a house, a lot of weekend warriors are like, oh, cool, I demoed blah, 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 right? And I'm like, how old was that house? Oh, 1950. I'm like, oh, you got lead exposure. So any homes built before 1978 had lead in the paint. And when you disrupt them or live in them, you get exposed. If you came from someone who got a lead exposure, it does cross the placenta. So you can get it that way. And then I am a huge proponent of
And
breastfeeding.
Mercury does
Yes, both
too.
of them.
Yep.
And I'm a huge proponent of breastfeeding, and you can get lead through breast milk. So no good deed goes unpunished. That's what I always say to my patients. Breastfeed if you can, but know that it's a detox event for you. So then let's look at mercury. Mercury is fish and fillings or breastfeeding. So, or coming from someone who had mercury. So heavy mercury fish, one serving is basically like 3 months worth of mercury, but people are eating it every week, twice a week, every other week. It's too much for our bodies. Don't forget, when we drink alcohol, that inhibits detox. And so women who drink have a harder time detoxing because we're just not that good at detoxing compared to men with alcohol. All right, going back to metals, cadmium, West Coast oysters, never eaten one in my life, and I didn't have cadmium, but West Coast oysters and tobacco, that's a huge source. And then arsenic is rice, and thallium is vegetables that come from California, especially organic ones, because the soil is very full of it. And so those are the sources. And then you go, okay, how do I get rid of them, right? So first step, try not to be exposed. Do your best. It's kind of hard sometimes, right? Because everyone loves sushi, and you might live where you live and you have your fillings. So do your best. Mm-hmm. If you can get your mercury fillings out with a biologic dentist, huge plug for them, get that taken out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you want to look at what are the things you can do that help your body get rid of toxins. So when you look at the liver, it's responsible for doing most of the work. So first off, don't poison the liver deliberately. That's where I say don't drink alcohol. Most people usually stop listening to the podcast at that point. They're like, okay, we're done with her. That's it. But it's a toxin. It is a deliberate toxin. So if you're looking to detox, alcohol would be one thing to cut out or decrease or cut down by like 95%, right? Have a sip, be done. So the liver has 2 phases. Phase 1 is where you take something that your body wants to get rid of and you make it actually more toxic. Kind of counterintuitive, but that's how it works. You make a toxic intermediate. And then in phase 2, you bind that in some way and put it most of the time in your gut or your urine, and you pee or poop it out. Okay. So phase 1, there are foods that improve phase 1. Basically all the brightly colored foods improve phase 1. And then foods that improve phase 2 are meats, chicken, poultry, meat, cow meat, eggs, fish, parsley, cilantro. There's a lot of foods you can eat that'll increase phase 1 and phase 2. So that's sort of how do you help your body along. But then the next level of it is if you're doing everything right and you're not $1,000,000, right? If you eat right, sleep, exercise, have good relationships, you're not a stress ball, and you don't really drink alcohol, you should be like better than ever. And if you're not, then you go, okay, I got toxins. And then you need an evaluation to figure out how high are they? What's the priority? What do we focus on? And then when we do a removal, we focus specifically on binding the metals and even amping up the liver even more. So there's stuff you can do on your own. Like you can take NAC and glutathione, no harm. If you're going to do binding for metals, you probably want to be supervised by a provider. Don't just do that on your own. That's not safe.
Wow. So I want to back up a little when you were talking about how it all goes to the placenta.
Yeah.
And the dentist that I had, she was not always a dentist. She was an assistant, and she was handling all the mercury back when they didn't realize, but with her hands.
Oh.
So she absorbed all of this mercury herself, and it went to her placenta, which caused her child so many issues before she discovered what it was. I mean, I think her child was going to lose the spleen. It was just really a nightmare. So they completely chelated all of that out. And that is why she is doing this type of a biological dentist now, because she knows the value in it. So I just think for people to realize how serious it could be when you have they're hidden, and it's not like you go to your general primary physician and they're going to say, oh yeah, you've got heavy metal poisoning.
No, they can't even look for it even. So here's the thing. If you have a huge exposure, like really, like you just took a bath in mercury, if you do a blood test, it'll show up positive. But otherwise, the body knows this is super toxic. You're not going to show up positive on a blood test, except for arsenic. Arsenic, for some reason, will show up on a blood test for stores. Everything else, lead, mercury, if you do a blood test, it's not going to show up. It's useless. So that's why people are like, oh, I went to my doctor. They tested me for mercury and I was negative. I was like, well, let's drill into that a little. How did you test? What did you do? They said, oh, a blood test. I'm like, that's useless. Don't waste your money. Go right to the provoked testing to see.
So what type of testing do you recommend?
So this is where I say, okay, you got to do a functional medicine workup, right? We have to back up, Linda. You have to fix the gut. You can't go right into toxins if your gut's a mess, if your adrenals are a mess. You got to fix the body first, the foundational things. And then this is like, oh, I'm doing everything right.
Starts methylating it out a little bit.
Yeah, it really does. And a lot of people, I don't know, 50-70% of people will get a lot better with just doing the foundational work. And then if you don't get better, then you go, oh, I've got toxins. Now I need to look at what's the priority. So I recommend doing what we use in our practice is urine testing. The metals, we use doctor's data. There's a bunch of companies that do it, but we like doctor's data. The price point is cheap. It's $69. It's cheap. And then
that's perfect.
Yeah, right. It's not that expensive. So we do a baseline test to make sure there's no acute exposure. And then we do a provoked test, which you take DMSA, which is a binder for the top metals, that binds it and helps it get into your urine. And so we do a provoked test. And I always say to people, if you have metals, you're either going to feel amazing. Like when I do my metals tests to check my levels, I never feel more productive than on those days. And it took me a while to figure out, because like you just have a good day. How do you notice that, right? Or you're going to feel terrible. So if you have one of those two reactions, when you do the test, you probably have metals. Cool. Okay. That's your early test result where you go, oh, okay, I'm going to have metals, brace myself, right? And for the mold and mycotoxins, which is the toxins mold puts out, environmental toxins and glyphosate, we do a different test from Great Plains Laboratory. If you have Medicare, we use a test by real-time labs because it's covered, but otherwise nothing's covered and you just pay out of pocket. And those are urine tests that we use glutathione to provoke. So it's pretty straightforward.
With mold, that's nothing to mess around with either. We also had exposure to mold when our builder left flashing off the roof, and we're in the house, and that's where I did my cardio, in that room. And I remember seeing some black on the wall, but I didn't realize it was black sticky mold, because the one day that the gates, it was like Niagara Falls, the ceiling fell in and the water came running through like Niagara Falls. I was like, oh my gosh. And we looked back behind the fireplace and there it was. And it was because they never put the flashing on the roof. So it was just going down behind the wall where the fireplace was. So I, to this day, although I think I've gotten better, a lot since that time, because that was around 2006. I thought, oh, I'm exhausted because I'm doing fitness competition and I'm
Right.
doing this dieting. But when that was all done, I'm like, oh no, I don't know what's wrong. What's wrong?
Mhm.
So to this day, though, I could walk in a room where there's mold and my nose will close up. Like
Yep.
I'm sensitive to it. So
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit, and what are some things for people to look for? What can they do? How
Yeah.
can they help themselves today?
Yeah. So the first is there are certain places that are often really moldy. So schools and dorms are often very moldy places. I live in Massachusetts, and there's a lot of older homes, Victorian homes, and they have these unfinished basements, which are often wet, and wet is moldy. So, or wet climates. If you live in a wet climate, south, it's humid, there's mold. So those are sort of the big picture things. And so what you want to try to do is not be exposed, because yeah, again, like 40-50% of the population will have the genes for mold reaction. And if you get it in you, then you have to bind it to get it out of you. And so if you're exposed to it, this is another plug for go get tested so you know what you're treating. You can do things like lots of prebiotics and fiber, because that'll bind to mycotoxins. But you kind of want to know, like, are you treating or are you just preventing? What are you doing here? And did you get it out of you? People always have this response like, oh, get that out. And I'm like, amen to that, sister, like, get that out of you. So it's awful for you.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it can really make you sick too.
Yeah, it can.
So I think when people hear the word detox
Yeah.
and they think they eat healthy, they're probably on the same page you were on once upon a time, where they think, oh, I eat healthy, I'm sure I'm fine. What would I need to detox?
Right.
But here again, you found all these things that you literally needed to detox from. Even organic can be not really organic. I mean,
Yeah.
my husband sometimes doesn't rinse the blueberries before he eats them. How bad is that?
Well, if they're organic, that should be okay, because in theory,
Okay.
there's no pesticides. And
Okay.
this is like where you balance out. It's kind of good for the microbiome to get exposed to a lot of different stuff and to get exposed to dirt and bacteria. We were healthier
So
when
it's
we
not the
played in.
worst.
It's not the worst, as long as there's no one who was handling it had hepatitis. Like hepatitis A is something you can get from often fresh lettuce. And so if as long as the person handling it has washed their hands before they handled your food, then yeah, you're probably fine. It's not a huge deal. But maybe the ick factor would want you to wash it, like, because you don't know where it came from. But it should be okay as long as there's no pesticides on it. So that would not be the fight I would pick with my husband. The fight I picked with my husband was he took over the shopping and he came home with non-organic stuff. And I was like, dude, what are you doing here? And he's like,
I do that too.
he was like, well, it was
I'm like,
super
no.
expensive. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll eat it, but don't ever come home with it again. Like, that's it. You
And like
can't
they
do that.
spray the crap out of
Yeah.
like blueberries, strawberries,
Yes.
raspberries, blackberries. I mean, those are the things I definitely want organic.
Yeah.
And
No
there's the
question.
list, Dirty Dozen. You can look it up on Dr. Google and
Mm-hmm.
find what you should definitely get organic. What about, how do you feel? I know they have a list where they're saying, oh, it's okay to have avocado, non-organic, bananas, but can't that stuff still leach through the skin a little?
I think you have to decide what point of view you're taking, Linda. So if you're taking the view, so when you talk about our bananas, the spray that they're using for bananas is super toxic. So yeah, maybe it's not getting into your food, but it's getting into your world. And what it's doing, so if we back up to strawberries, the chemicals that they spray on strawberries that are not organic, the frogs that live downstream, there's runoff, and the frogs that live downstream, they convert to female from male. It's such an endocrine disruptor that they become female when they started out male. Okay. So when you look at the things that these pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, toxic chemicals, what they're doing to the world, the problem is that when you buy not organic, you're encouraging the not organic farmers to do more of that. And so it's like when you have kids and they have bad behavior and you're like ignoring it. Well, no, you can't ignore it because they're just going to keep doing it. So voting with your feet and saying, no, even though it may not be as harmful for me, what it's doing to the earth.
Oh yeah, there again,
it's worth
like a chain reaction, right?
Yes.
Like that makes perfect sense to me, why we would want to then be choosing organic. And also, let's talk about the argument of, oh, it's so expensive.
Oh man, pay now or pay later, right? So when I got my environmental toxins
100%.
test, it's a 17-page report. It's one of those like eye-numbing reports, but I sat down with my cheater glasses and I sat down with it and I'm looking all over it and I realized I'm high for the toxins for gasoline fumes. And so then I'm like, gasoline fumes, I pump my own gas. We haven't yet gotten in my husband's on the list for an electric car and then I'll be next. So I still have a gasoline car. And so I pump my own gas and because it's cheaper, right? We go to Costco, it's cheaper. And then I had this epiphany, like, wait a minute. So just to back up, I had all these toxins. My hair was falling out. I was 16 pounds heavier. My brain wasn't working. I had fatigue. And I then started to not just eat organic, but do all this work to get myself healthy. And so we're doing all this work. I'm spending all this money on supplements. And then we put a sauna in, more money. And I'm eating foods to improve the liver. Like I'm doing all this work. So I get this report and I said to my husband, that's it. I'm not pumping my gas anymore. And he said to me, but it's more expensive. And I said, I get that, but we're going to have to go big picture here because I'm either going to pay less at the pump or I'm going to pay more. And it's intrinsically more money to get it out of me than it is to prevent it from going in me in the first place. So it is more expensive in the moment to eat organic. But what you're not accounting for is what's the impact on your endocrine system. You know, when you look at all cardiometabolic disease stems from inflammation. Cardiometabolic disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, insulin resistance, obesity, that's all cardiometabolic. That's all inflammatory in its nature. Where does inflammation come from? Toxins. So if you look at it and you go, we have cancer too. So cancer, cardiometabolic disease, there are inflammation gone wrong. And what's at the root is toxins. So if the goal is don't get cancer, don't get cardiovascular disease, don't get diabetes, then you have to decrease your toxins exposure, and that's environmental and what you're eating. And so it makes a huge difference now, wherever you are, to change that trajectory. Every moment makes a difference, right? Like what time is it to get clean now?
The price of terrible health is too high.
It's an epidemic. Like we're literally dying to get clean.
Yeah, you have to think about what is the real price of not getting the organic and loading my body with all these toxins, because the liver can only do so much. Once it gets loaded up with all the toxins, then it's not going to burn off the fat. It's not going to do all the things that it's designed to do if it's overloaded and burdened. And you talked about pathway 1 and pathway 2. I want to dive into that just a little bit more. I'm doing a detox right now that it cleans you out, pathway 1, pathway 2. And I've had so much energy. You know, I'm going to be 60 in September. You
don't look 60.
Thanks. And I'm just feeling amazing, going strong. And I think just keeping yourself healthy, it isn't just eating your greens and exercising. It's also cleaning out the inside of the body, which is invisible. We can't see it, kind of, in a way, only in brain fog and lack of energy and not being able to go to the bathroom and all these things. And I can't tell you how many people have brain fog. And you were talking, you had brain fog.
Mhm.
Now, when you did all this detoxing, did that lift?
Oh yeah, I got a lot sharper. And the problem with brain fog is you don't know you have it. You just know you're not how you should be. Do you know, some people, when they get really bad, they're like, I have brain fog. But most people just think they're disorganized, or they have ADHD, or they can't remember things, or they're just too busy, right? We sort of chalk it up to all these excuses. And I mean, when I went off the cliff, I was like, oh, effing perimenopause, man. You know, I thought it was perimenopause because I was
Right.
48. I was like, well, it's
Mhm.
perimenopause. Perimenopause sucks, but it's
Yeah.
not perimenopause. It was toxins. Now that I got rid of the toxins, my menopause is just lovely. Like my sex drive's back. I don't have hot flashes. I lost my weight. I'm getting my muscle tone back. Like that's the impact. I look better now than I did when I was, I mean, certainly when I was 20, I had the benefit of youth, but I wasn't healthy the way I am now. Different.
And I love what you said. And I just kind of think the whole thing is you have this brain fog and you don't realize how you should be feeling,
Mhm.
and you're not connecting the dots of how it's internal. You think
Right.
it's your hormones or your age or all these things. How can our listeners learn to listen? Because I will just say, when I was having all this mercury, the thing I kept consistently saying was every weekend, I feel like I'm being poisoned.
Oh,
And I was.
yeah.
So that is you, your body. I was in touch, but I didn't understand. So
Right.
like, how can we get in touch with, like, let's say that's how you're feeling today. How can they get in touch and learn to recognize the symptoms, the signs, and be able to tune into that?
Yeah, I always say to people, I think it starts with what your belief system is. And so I believe, and in our practice at Five Journeys, we believe, this is our clinic, that you are meant to be vital, vibrant, healthy, alive, interested in intimacy, and able to perform until you're at least 100. At least 100. And that's not just like live to 100 and suffer. That's live to 100 with vitality. The true meaning of longevity is healthy longevity, right? And so if you start with that belief, as opposed to the belief of, as I get older, I'm kind of just going to fail and get more decrepit and lose function. If you have that belief, then the world will show up as, yeah, you're not feeling as well, but that's just the way it is. But if you start with the belief that I'm really meant to be similar to the aging of a fine wine, that I'm meant to get better every decade, wiser, more fit, healthier, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, that's meant to broaden and deepen with every decade, then when things come up, you go, oh, that doesn't actually match. Let's figure that out. Right. And then you have to start getting providers around you who echo that feeling, because your primary doctor might not have that belief, in which case, you're having cross conversations. You're saying I don't feel well, and they're like, well, you're 59 and 3/4, so what do you expect, right? And you're like, no, I reject that. There, why?
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. So starting with the belief that, yeah, I'm really meant to be amazing, and then finding providers who support you in that, believe it, and can get the tools to untangle what's going on. Functional medicine
Well,
is really where senior functional medicine providers is where you want to go. That's just kind of
yes, 100%. And you could go to your regular primary care physician and they kind of support that philosophy of, oh, well, you're getting older now. You can expect for things to start falling apart.
yeah.
And you will hear that. You will hear that at a primary care physician sometimes.
Yes.
So what I'm not trying to say don't go to your primary care physician, but I'm just saying you find the evidence, go find the evidence for what you want. So if you want to be vibrant and healthy, there's evidence that
Yep.
you can be vibrant and healthy all the rest of your days until you leave the earth. So, but if you want to be like, well, I'm getting older, I don't think, I want to run anymore, or I don't want to do this or that. You can find evidence to support you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of am agreeing with you on the whole belief system, because if I don't feel like that I can be vibrant and healthy, I'm just gonna
Why
be like,
would you?
I'm eating a cheeseburger and fries.
Right. Right. So you need to find the people who are going to play the game with you, you know, and they're out there. I mean, no question, they're out there. We're here. Like, it's possible.
So what advice do you give people then when they're trying to eliminate their toxins once they're identified? I mean, should they go cold turkey? Should they prepare a little bit? What are the effects of both methods?
What toxins are we talking about? Are we talking about coffee, where you're going to be an evil witch if you go cold turkey? Or are we talking about alcohol, where you'll just feel better? Are we talking about sugar, where you're going to have cravings? Like, can we narrow this down? Because this is way too big. This is huge, right? You won't feel anything if you just stop pumping your gas. You'll be happy. You'll be like, oh, cool. Fill that up for me, please. So I guess it depends which toxins we're talking about. So coffee, if you're addicted to coffee, by the way, coffee's moldy. And that's a huge source of exposure if you're drinking
and bird caca. If you don't get the right kind of coffee, there's literally, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's the truth. I did a lot of research when writing my book, The Sisterhood of Sweat, on coffee. And you could get some coffee that doesn't have that, but it still could be moldy. I gave up coffee completely.
Yeah. Yeah. People always, my patients will say to me, what's your favorite coffee brand? And I'm like, I don't drink coffee because could you imagine me hopped up on anything? Like, this is how I am. Could you imagine me like then jacked up with caffeine? So I don't drink caffeine. But so if you're addicted to coffee, you really could go cold turkey. It's going to be like 3 to 4 days of suffering. I usually say to people, have your last day of coffee be on a Thursday. So that gives you Friday, you'll have not so great of a day, but then Saturday, Sunday, you can lay low. By Monday, you're mostly better. Or you can wean down, like figure out what you're on, and then go to a half dose, and then go to half of that every week, go to a half of a dose, and then switch over to green tea, and then switch off of it. So to wean it down.
I do tea.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you can wean 100%. Down or go, and either one depends, like what's your philosophy, right? What works better in your life? Do you have 3 days to be off your game, or do you want to just sort of quietly wean down a little bit? So that depends. And then alcohol, I would go cold turkey on alcohol. The biggest issue with alcohol, as long as you're not addicted, meaning you're not drinking at the level where you're going to withdraw. So let's put that to the side. The biggest issue with alcohol is the social nature of it. That what do you do when you go to a friend's house? You drink. What do you do when you go out? You drink. What do you do when you get ready for dinner and you're prepping? You drink. So it's the habit and the nature that's really hard to break. And so trying to find ways to sort of substitute, or I say to my patients, instead of drinking a glass of wine while you're cooking, have a wine spritzer, right? And not like spritzer 10%, wine 90%, 90% spritzer, 10% wine. Try that, just because you want and have it in a wine glass, but have the experience, because it's the habit and the experience that you're looking for a lot of times, and the belonging.
Well, I think it means R&R. It means rest and relaxation.
Yeah.
And that is what you're looking for. So finding it in other ways too, other than a drink.
Yeah. And often when we're stressed, we're going to crave sugar and alcohol because that's a quick way to get sugar. And so figuring out, what are your triggers? What are you stressed by? Do you need a few minutes? Have you slept enough? Are you rested enough? There's a lot of triggers. So alcohol, I usually say wean down hugely or go cold turkey. Sugar, if you're addicted, there's a 2-week washout, because what's in you is yeast, and it needs to eat. And so it's causing you to crave
that. It'll just gobble that
sugar,
up.
right? So it's like, I'm hungry. And then you're like, I need sugar. So it's in you. And so until it dies off, it's going to cause you to crave. And it's about 2 weeks. Although if you have metals, it can be longer. And then, but the emotional attachment to food lasts much longer. So you want to make sure you address that emotional, like the boredom, the feeling left out, the habit, the everyone else is doing it, I just feel like it. It's what I always did. It's what my family did. Like, there's a lot of layers to this, right? So
yeast loves sugar. So yeast loves alcohol and it's in it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's why you could be feeling bloated then after you're having very much alcohol. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying don't have your occasional glass, but that would be the reasoning in why lessening it could be
Yeah.
better for you. And I know a lot of the listeners were probably, I've had people on about leaky gut before, but I still think not everybody understands what that means completely.
Sure.
What would you classify it as, and how long? I have three questions, so this is threefold. What would you classify leaky gut as? How long does it take to get rid of it, and how can we get rid of leaky gut?
Okay, this is a huge question. This sounds so innocuous, right? Like, oh, what's leaky gut? Okay, that's the easy part. Leaky gut is the occurrence of, let me back up, from your mouth to your anus. It's a tube and it's lined by cells, one cell thick. Okay, so it's not like you think of your skin, and if it were one cell thick, you could break it open. It's multiple layers. Okay, from the outside world into your body through your skin, but through your mouth, it's one cell thick. And they're held together, they're stuck together in what's called tight junctions. Okay, so are we on video, by the way? Like, is it, it'll be video. Okay, so if you're watching the video, my hands are the tight junctions. If you're part of that, 40% seems to be the magic number. 40% is MTHFR, 40% has genes for celiac. So if you're in that 40% and you have one or two genes for celiac disease, when you eat wheat or gluten, that upregulates, it binds into the cells and it upregulates this thing called zonulins, and zonulins open up the tight junctions. So instead of what's in your body, your body gets to choose what it picks up or leaves, kind of like when you play bridge, you get to pick up or leave it. So your body should have that choice. But when you have leaky gut and you upregulate these zonulins cause the tight junctions to open. And then your body doesn't get to choose what comes in, because it's like opening the floodgates. And imagine all through your mouth to your anus, through the entire system, everything that your body's exposed to is now getting into your bloodstream. So that's food particles, bacteria, heavy metals, mycotoxins, other toxins, whatever. Okay. So the first, what it is just the ability of anything to get into your bloodstream. Then your bloodstream goes, wait, you don't belong here. And you generate an immune response to those foods, bacteria, toxins, whatever. And your immune system gets jacked up. That's inflammation. Now, your second question was, how do we get rid of it? But you first have to understand, how'd you get it in the first place? So if you have right, if you have a major stressful event, like you get in a car accident, you go through a divorce, you have a fire, you have a major flood in your house, any major event can cause instantaneous leaky gut. Like, boom, you've got leaky gut. If you're someone who has those genes and you eat gluten, and what do we eat for breakfast? Cereal. What'd you eat for lunch? Sandwich. What'd you eat for dinner? Pasta and chicken. Like you're getting gluten a lot for most of us, and not me because I have celiac, but a lot of us are. And so if you're getting exposed to gluten and it's causing leaky gut, then you're just sort of challenging all the time. And then if you have dysfunction in the gut, that can over time cause leaky gut too. So you want to figure out, like, what's the cause of my gut dysfunction? Is it a food that I'm reacting to? Is it a stress? Is it ongoing stress? Is it gut dysfunction? Like, what's happening there? Then peel it off. Okay. So you peel it off, and it takes a long time to heal the gut. But if you can take away the cause of it quickly, right? Like for me, it took 20 years to figure out that I had celiac. So by the time I figured it out, it was a hot freaking mess. My gut was a mess. So it took a lot of years to figure that out.
Yeah.
But, so my first food sensitivity panel, when I got diagnosed with celiac, was crazy. I had like high reactions, 3 times the upper limit of normal to 70% of the foods. Okay. And then I did my food sensitivity panel 2 years ago, right before COVID started. And I said to them, did y'all make a mistake on my test? Like, any chance you gave me someone else's results? Because it looks really good. I had no high level reactions. I had one moderate reaction. The rest were like small, and it was to maybe 10% of the foods. Huge difference, right? But we're talking 16 years. I have been doing this for 16 years. So depending on the degree of dysfunction, that's going to determine how long it takes to really heal the gut. But you can get 50 to 60% better within a couple of months, but it takes a really long time to be able to have resilience and sustain it, right? You can't just go back to your old ways. You have to sustain it. And that synergizes and keeps improving on itself. So you get better and better over time. So not quick, not slow. It sort of depends. It depends where you fall.
I like the answer, because I think many times that I've had other experts on, they didn't really give that. I didn't think of asking it, the question, but I don't think they really covered that. And I don't think people really understand how much time of straightening that whole process out takes and how important it is. If you're bloating and you're tired and all of these things, it could also be this leaky gut, because everything's leaching into your bloodstream and you're not really getting all the nutrients from your food. I take some things for leaky gut. What kind of recommendations, just something people could do today, would you give for someone to try to have a healthy gut and get rid of this leak?
All right.
Leaks.
So one, ditch the processed food, because if you're in that 40% and you have gluten and it opens up the tight junctions, then you're getting exposed to the outside world inside your body ongoingly. So that's just ditching that will decrease the incidence of leaky gut right there. Alcohol can contribute to leaky gut. So minimizing or eliminating alcohol. Sugar, because candida can increase leaky gut. If you have an autoimmune disease, I would go on a super clean diet. And what I mean by that is no processed food, no sugar, no alcohol, probably no dairy, nothing processed, no wheat, like really, really clean. Okay. And then there's supplements that can heal the gut. So a really high quality, high dose probiotic with Aspergillus and Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium in it. That's good for the gut. These are general things. If you have a histamine issue, you want to be careful, because some probiotics can trigger people who have histamine issues. So you just want to pay attention to how you do with it. Then L-Glutamine heals the gut. Marshmallow root heals the gut. They smell really good. They don't taste really good. Aloe can help heal the gut. Depending on the form, it might make you poop or it'll heal your gut. So work with a functional medicine provider on which form you're getting. And then stress, because minimizing stress will help heal the gut and reverse.
Oh gosh, 100%.
We could do a whole episode on just stress. So really sort of cleaning up what you're putting in it and giving yourself some TLC essentially.
And now that you say that about the stress, I did the root cause protocol where we can do tissue mineral analysis and order blood tests, and you compare. And the biggest thing when we were doing all of our case studies, it was always during their consultation part, leading back, the stress happened first before all the issues that the person had.
Yep.
Every single case that I studied. So the stress, minimizing stress is huge. Yeah. Huge factor. So I love that you said that. This has been so good today. You're such a wealth of information. I really, I love your fresh approach, and I really feel like this was a dynamic conversation, and I thank you for that. And I know you have your book, Dirty Girl. Tell us where we can get that, where we can find you on social media, and all about your freebie for the audience.
Sure. So it's on Amazon. The book's on Amazon. If you're going to type in Dirty Girl, either use the word detox after Dirty Girl or use my name, which is Trubow, or sort of detox book, because otherwise you're going to head down a different rabbit hole. So Amazon has the book. And then our clinic website is 5journeys.com. And we have a free gift for the listeners, which is a detox your life, non-toxic guide to healthy living. And that's at 5journeys.com/promo. All my social on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn is Wendie Trubow, MD. And I'm assuming it'll be in the show notes how to spell it, right? And then we have a podcast, which is the 5 Journeys podcast, Live Like You Matter, which is where we dive into kind of all things health. So that's
perfect.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
my
And
pleasure.
funny that you mentioned the whole thing about the rabbit hole, because I wondered that, but then when I looked you up, your name came right up
Yeah.
right with it. So I don't think anybody has to worry about it. So, but that's fun. Well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Sweat. Let us know what resonated with you. And as always, keep on keeping on. Bye, everyone. You know what? My little lady will edit that.